You're listening to Ret Read Podcast. I'm Anna.
I'm Serge, and we're here to talk about books we've read.
Hope you enjoy. Hey Serge.
Hey Anna.
How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Excited to be back recording another episode.
So before we do our review of Fear Street Cheerleaders, The Third Evil, we're going to review two books first. Serge, you're halfway done with a book, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm reading Tatterhood, published by the Feminist Press. We actually picked up the second, third, and fourth books in this series. This is the first one, and I got the first one for Christmas. I actually haven't had a chance to read the other three, but I started reading this one after Christmas, and it's been pretty good. It's a collection of myths, legends, and folk tales from around the world that have a female protagonist, which is not as common to have a female protagonist, and stories that have a female protagonist are often told from a male perspective. The best example is a lot of the Disney princess stories. The female protagonist plays kind of a passive role, and what they did in this book is they tried to actually collect stories from around the world where the female protagonist actually takes more of an active role in her story. The book is actually kind of aimed at children. I would say it's written very simply, but the stories are very compelling and beautiful in their own way. So far, I'm really enjoying it a lot. The stories are from all over the world. For example, the titular story, Tatterhood, is from Scandinavia, but there's also stories from Africa. There's a story from the Native Americans. There's several other stories so far from different parts of the world. I would recommend it, and I'm going to read the other books as well in the series, and you'll definitely be hearing more about those coming up. You guys know I'm into the whole myths and legends thing, so this is going to be interesting for me. Also because, like I said, these books are written for a younger audience. They are going to be a lot easier for me to read, so I'll definitely get through them quickly.
Is there a common theme in the stories in this particular volume?
I don't see any kind of theme whatsoever other than, the overarching theme I mentioned earlier, which is the female protagonist that is independent and takes charge of her own life, doesn't wait to be rescued, but actually decides to do her own thing, or does the rescuing herself.
I just figured because there's 4 volumes, I thought maybe each volume was a different thing.
Now, I might be wrong, but I think the other 3 volumes do have themes, but this first one doesn't. It's a general one to get you into the series. So which book do you want to talk about?
I finished a book. It was a book of short stories called Where the Stars Rise, Asian Science Fiction and Fantasy, edited by Lucas K. Law. It's a collection of 23 sci-fi fantasy stories that either have a significant tie to an Asian culture, an Asian historical thing, some sort of Asian character, or something along those lines. It's also one of the more uneven anthologies I've read in a while. There were some really incredible 5-star stories, in my opinion, but there were also some stories that lost my interest pretty quickly. The anthology is just, it has to be a sci-fi or fantasy story written by an Asian author. The stories themselves are quite broad. You have a story that talks about the Korean emperor who invented Hangul to a story about people living on the moon. And it's just so different from each other, but they're in the same collection of stories that really stuck out to me. It was Sejong the Great and his invention of Hangul and a bunch of other inventions. And, that story stuck out to me because I know that you have a problem with the whole ancient aliens built the pyramids thing because it's a way of diminishing what humans can figure out, human ingenuity. And I feel like this story, while well written, also was along the same lines of sort of looking down on human ingenuity. I mean, clearly Sejong the Great and the people in his court could have figured out Hangul and all the other things he was supposed to have invented in real life.
Wait a second, so it's like an ancient alien, that comes down and gives him the alphabet
no,
or whatever?
Well, that's a spoiler. But, I mean, that is a sci-fi story along the lines of, the ancient aliens, Stargate, the Goa'uld, built the pyramids, or whatever.
That's a bunch of malarkey as far as I'm concerned.
So other stories that really stuck out to me were Weaving Silk, which is a story about an earthquake or some sort of natural disaster hits Japan. After this earthquake, Japan just loses all its technology. And it's about a girl and her younger sister trying to survive on their own, selling onigiris, just struggling in this post-apocalyptic Japan. Another good story was Old Souls, about being reborn, reincarnation, but some people remembering their past lives. So the main character, in every single one of her lives, she dies very young. And she just wants to figure out, can she be the one who can live past the age of 19 or 20? Crash is another good one. It has to do with a moon colony, basically a crash that occurs next to the colony.
Is it like a spaceship that crashed, or is it an asteroid that crashed, or what's going on there?
So once again, this is also from the point of view of a child, but her mother is actually sent to the crash site. The girl and her siblings are upset, and they are very curious as to what their mother was sent out there to investigate.
I see.
And another good story was The Observer Effect, about a school shooting and superheroes. So all these stories are written by Asian authors. Some of them are translated stories, but like I said, it's a very uneven book of stories. There's 23 stories. I would say slightly more than half are 4 stars and up. The others, maybe it was just me and I couldn't get into the stories. It is uneven. So if you read a story that you don't like, skip it and go to the next story. It's not top heavy or bottom heavy. It's just sort of scattered throughout. I actually gave this book 3.5 stars on Goodreads. It's worth a read, and also, you were talking about how Tatterhood is a collection of mythological stories with female protagonists told from their point of view. There's been a lot of talk about diversity. It is an issue, and, this is a book that has a lot of diversity, all Asian authors. You don't really see that many sci-fi stories have that point of view. These are Asians being normal people. We aren't just people who do martial arts. We aren't just people who do math. We are beyond that stereotype. Because of how this book is, you just see Asians in all types of settings.
I want to go back to your rating for this book a little bit and talk about how it's got a lot of really crappy stories weighing it down. But folks, if you're interested in reading this book but you're not sure, I have a suggestion. This is a strategy I take. Just don't read the bad ones. Anna, would you say if you get through a page of a story and it starts to look like crap, it's pretty much a safe bet to just skip the rest of it and go to the next one?
I would say read the first 2.5 pages. There were some stories that did take me a little bit to get into. I think they are short stories after all.
Right, and that's the great thing about one of these short story anthologies is that, you don't have to read every single story.
After the intermission, we're going to be back and we're going to talk about Fear Street Cheerleaders, The Third Evil. Their anguished faces revealed that all 4 girls realized it. The ancient evil spirit was back. It had been right at their table. Was it inhabiting one of them? Possessing one of them? Which one? Which one?
We're back with the 3rd installment of Fear Street Cheerleaders. Let's just jump into it. Prediction accuracy.
I did so poorly. I said that the evil spirit is obviously still around and possessing someone, which is right, but I didn't really settle on who it would be. I just said that in the second evil, you saw the evil spirit go down the drain, so it could be anyone with indoor plumbing. And, it was in someone with indoor plumbing. I've said that the spirit would be gunning for Corky because 3rd time's the charm. I've said that Deborah's occult fascination will come back and play a bigger role. I mean, she still has her occult fascination, but it played no role at all. I said that there will be a showdown in the cemetery. 0. There would be more than one murder attempt, which was true. There was more than one murder attempt, but there would be a gruesome factor off the charts. That was not a fact. I said that it would be multiple murder victims, male and female. That was true. I said that the murderer is a possessed female, which is correct. I said the murder weapon is supernatural, which, no duh. Something near the water, perhaps near Fear Lake. The Fear Lake part was wrong, but it was near the water. But there was a Fear Lake thing as well, but that was in a flashback.
Yeah, you know what? I gotta say, we're gonna get into this later, but the murder weapon is not really supernatural, right? They go for all natural, honest to goodness, human on human murder this time. It's odd, and we're definitely going to get into this in the nitpicks.
I said there would be a bloody death, and there was no bloody death. There was something that involved a ton of blood, though.
Yeah. This time, if you guys remember my prediction from the previous episode, I actually got one thing pretty much correct. And that was that I figured out the mode of body hopping that the evil spirit takes based on the previous 2 books. My prediction was that obviously Seraphir is not gone. I figured out that last time her grand wind of death exit, she simply jumped into the nearest body, which was Kimmi. You gotta figure out who the nearest body is when she does the snake of death pouring out of the mouth down the drain. Our two options in this case are either Corky or her brother. It was a 50-50 shot. I flipped a coin. I guessed it was Sean, and I was wrong about that. It wasn't. I did guess it had to be the Corcorans. And so I decided, based on that, there's going to be a dead cheerleader because the Corcorans are going to blame the other cheerleaders, and Sarah Fear likes to punish her host's enemies, and I was right about that. The other cheerleaders were definitely the targets this time, and I said that the murder weapon is going to be a cheer routine because there's been 2 failed murder by cheerings, and it has to work now, and I was basically wrong about that. There was no murder by cheering happening in this book, and this is one of the many departures that it takes from the other 2 books in the series. I was also going to say that the murder victim is female, and the murderer is a possessed male, with the caveat that I said it would be a Corcoran, and I flipped a coin and said it would be Sean. Yeah, there were some female attempted murder victims, and obviously the murderer is not a possessed male, so I was wrong on that. I did get that kernel of truth, though, regarding the method of evil spirit transfer. I'm glad that happened because it's made me feel a little bit better about my predictions. Recently, they've been a little bit on a slump for the last 10 episodes or so, but here and there, there's like a bright ray of hope, and this is one of them.
So talking about the third evil, once again, we have spoilery chapter titles, but I feel like in this book, they're more red herring chapter titles than actually spoilers.
Yeah, so it looks like RL Stine's listening, and he's taking some of our critiques into account as he's writing these books.
Yes, several decades ago. This book stays with Corky for the most part, except there's one chapter near the end that goes to someone else's point of view. It's April in Shadyside, a few months after the second evil. There's a new girl in the cheerleading squad, and she's showing up the veterans of the squad. Like, Miss Green keeps asking her to demonstrate different moves, and it's just burning at the other cheerleaders.
Yep.
The cheerleaders are headed to a spring camp to compete against other cheerleaders, but odd things start happening to cheerleaders at the camp and to the cheerleaders on the Shadyside squad, and it's clear the evil is still around. Let's talk about the characters.
Alright, yeah, let's get right back into the same characters as the previous 2 books. First of all, we got Corky Corcoran. Like always, green eyes, high cheekbones, creamy white skin, and this time she's wearing her very light and fine blonde hair in a ponytail.
Her little brother Sean is still a pest. He's a practical joker who pouts a lot.
We got the practical jokes making a big comeback. Big shout back to the first book where those really played a big role.
I mean, in the second book, they were still mourning the death of Bobby, so maybe that's why I didn't have practical jokes.
I guess so. His practical jokes really took like a morbid turn. Perhaps that's like maybe his way of coping with his sister's death.
Next, you have Hannah Mills. She's actually a new member of the cheerleading squad. She made it after spring tryouts. She's slender, graceful. She's a freshman. She has a pretty face with long, straight black hair that she wears in a single braid to her waist. Her dark brown eyes are constantly flashing with excitement, and everything is 110% with her.
Yeah, she's really giving it her all. She's feeling that school spirit.
She's also a suck-up because she constantly tries to ingratiate herself with the co-captains of the cheerleading squad.
So now that you mentioned co-captains, that brings us to Kimmi Bass. She's actually been demoted to co-captain. She was a full-fledged singular captain of the cheerleading team in the previous book, but now she's just got a round face topped by a mop of crimp black hair, and she's got pink cheeks.
And the other co-captain is Deborah Kern. She's Ronnie's friend, but throughout this book, you see her start to drift towards Hannah. I guess that sucking up is working. She's got straight blonde hair cut very short with icy blue eyes. She's thin, almost too thin, and seldomly smiles. She's a little quiet and a little cold, and she wears this hippie crystal around her neck because she's super into the occult after the going-ons in the first evil.
Veronica Mitchell is still in this book. She's got curly red hair, if you guys forgot, tiny round stub of a nose, and a face full of freckles. And apparently she looks like she's 12. She, much like the others, is resentful of Hannah. She's just resentful of everybody, right? Because she was resentful of the Corcorans when they first came up.
Well, to be fair, the Corcorans joining the team in the first evil got her demoted to backup cheerleader.
Right.
So it kind of makes sense that she'd be upset with the Corcorans, but her issue with Hannah is just pure jealousy.
Looks like 12. It should also be, has the emotional maturity of a 12-year-old and gets jealous of everybody.
Next, you've got cheerleader A, Heather Dio, who's best friends with former cheerleader B, Megan Carmen, who's graduating in June. That's why they have Hannah on the squad now. They still don't play any role whatsoever.
You could have at least had them murdered or something, and that didn't even happen. Now we're wrapping up the series, and turns out, surprise, they were completely useless side characters that did nothing.
Next up, you got Miss Green, the PE and health teacher. Compact, frizzy brown hair, plain face. She's got a husky voice. They don't really talk about it in this book, so let's just move on. She's got a well-deserved reputation for being tough.
This is one of those cases of show it, don't say it, right? In the first book, we find out that she's super tough, and you get to see her being really tough with Bobby and some of the other cheerleaders, but she doesn't really get to act tough. She has an opportunity to be really tough with two of the girls in this book. She threatens that there will be consequences, and then you never see it.
Next up, we've got Simmons. He's made a return from the first Evo. He's the young blonde bus driver that caused the death, the manslaughter of a character in the first book, but he's still on the Shadyside payroll.
You know, the funny thing is though, right, he didn't cause her death, quote unquote, because even though she died that night, her reanimated corpse was walking around for like a month after that, so he really dodged the bullet on that one.
But didn't she become paraplegic after the accident? I mean, that's still fireable offense.
Yes, and also, wasn't he supposed to fix the showers?
Yes.
And then Bobby, got scalded to death in that shower that he never fixed.
Yes.
So this guy is responsible for the deaths of 2 high school students, and he still has a job.
You got Blair O'Connell. She's a cheerleader from the Redwood Bulldogs, one of the teams at that cheer camp. She has beautiful red hair, tall with a tiny waist. She's just an amazing cheerleader, okay? She makes things look effortless, and everyone hates her. And she has, a really crappy attitude, too. But
well, I bet her team probably likes her, right? She gets them those big wins, right?
Well, judging by how people on the Shadyside squad feel about Hannah, I don't think she's as beloved as you
Maybe
may
the other
want to think.
squad is a little bit more mature about these things.
Maybe. She did go to Sunday school with Kimmi back in the day.
And finally, we've got Jason Hardy.
He pops up in a flashback.
Jason Hardy is Seraphira's servant. He's referenced in the previous book as possibly her love interest after her husband dies. He's a tall, stern-faced man with a black, waxed mustache.
Alright, let's get into the plot.
Alright.
The book is divided into 3 parts, like all the other books have been. So, part 1, Team Spirit.
So, Team Spirit begins a few months after the second Evil. It is now no longer the wintertime, it is spring, it's in April. We open the scene with a cheerleading practice where Hannah outperforming all of the other girls on the squad. And everybody's a little bit jealous. Kimmi and Deborah are now co-captains, but not Corky, because Miss Green thinks that Corky doesn't need the extra pressure after all that she's been through. And this kind of bothers Corky a little bit, even though she understands that this is probably the right thing, but she's still kind of bugged by it. And she's bugged by how good Hannah is.
Hannah dominates the practice to the point where they are changing their routines based on what Hannah is doing. The veteran cheerleaders, after practice, gather at The Corner, which is a new coffee shop a few blocks from school, and they basically talk about Hannah and how jealous they are of her.
Yeah, they're talking about, all the guys are flocking to her, and she could have whatever boyfriend she wants. Anyway, while they're talking, they all order food. Somebody orders fries, somebody else orders a burger, and Corky orders a bowl of split pea soup.
We promise that's gonna come back.
Yeah, so they talk about the cheerleader camp that is happening over spring break at Madison College. Their cheerleading squad is going there, and there's going to be other schools there.
The one from Waynesbridge, the one from Belvedere, the Redwood Bulldogs.
Anyway, they're all talking, and while Deborah and Ronnie go to the bathroom, Kimmi talks to Corky about how she's constantly worried about the evil still being in her. An ever-present fear, and maybe every time she feels weird, it's because of the evil.
So after Deborah and Ronnie get back from the bathroom, the pea soup starts to bubble and volcano, it just splashes everywhere.
So anyway, all the girls leave pretty quickly after that. They kind of just get scared off and they basically run away. I'm not even sure if they pay their check.
Yeah, that's their cue to leave.
Yeah. So now they all realize that the evil is back.
Kimmi drives Corky home and they take a walk because neither one of them want to be alone. And they end up walking down the street to the cemetery and walking back. But while they're doing it, it's very obvious that Kimmi has PTSD from being possessed. And she just keeps bringing it up. She says that she doesn't remember anything that happened during that time period. And she's just obsessed whether maybe she has the evil in her still. Maybe she has the evil in her still. She just can't stop thinking about it.
So that night at home, while Corky is in her bedroom, she's kind of asleep, and she actually sees Bobby come to her. Bobby floats around the room and seems to be trying to tell Corky something. She's actually like mouthing words. Corky can't hear the sound and she can't read the lips, but it's clear that Bobby's trying to communicate something to her. And then what happens is Bobby kind of comes really close to her and bows her head down, like grabs herself by the hair and takes off the top of her head. And she can actually see inside of her head, right inside the skull.
And it's pulsating with thousands of squirming, crawling cockroaches. And
then Bobby disappears into the moonlight. The ground is covered in cockroaches and they're writhing and just crawling everywhere. And Corky screams, "Ah!" And she's like running out of her room, squishing the cockroaches under her bare feet, and they're like squirting cockroach ooze everywhere. She's freaking out.
Well, her parents rush into her room and go, "What is going on?" She's like, "The cockroaches, they're everywhere." And Sean's like, "Why are you waking us up?" And there are no cockroaches anywhere. So we flash forward. The cheerleaders are arriving at cheer camp at Madison College, which is about an hour drive from Shadyside. And Corky actually spends that hour drive telling Deborah about the dream. And Deborah's like, "Oh, I've read about analyzing dreams, and I think Bobby's trying to tell you something. I just don't know what." Which is like, yes, thank you, Deborah. That's not obvious or anything.
So Deborah, Kimmi, and Corky are going to be in the same dorm room. There's a bed, and then there's a bunk bed. But right as they're setting up all their stuff, Hannah barges in, and she wants to room with them because Ronnie and Heather filled up the dressers and took the top bunk that she wanted, and she can't sleep on the bottom bunk.
She claims that she's too claustrophobic. She doesn't want anyone above her.
So Deborah's being really nice, and she switches rooms with her. Because she's like, whatever, I don't mind. Deborah actually hasn't unpacked any of her stuff yet, so it kind of works out. Now we got Hannah stuck with Kimmi and Corky, and we already know they don't like her.
Hannah wants to unpack all her stuff and put things in the dresser, but she also wants to take a bath. So she kind of demands that Corky draw a hot bath for her while she unpacks.
Yes, Princess Hannah needs to have her, beauty bath. Whatever. So Corky's being nice. She's, already unpacked and stuff. So she's like, okay, fine, I'll go do your bath. So she turns on the water, gets the hot and cold mixed just right, and fills the bathtub.
And then she goes out, Kimmi goes in to use the bathroom, and then Kimmi and Corky are ready to go. But as they're, halfway down the hall, Kimmy's like, "Oh, I forgot the pom-pom," so they rush back to their room.
And as they rush back there, they hear Hannah screaming, "Ah!" Turns out the water was scalding hot. Hannah's legs are bright red from her feet to her knees, and she's being very accusatory and just yelling at them "How could you do this to me? My skin is red, but quickly turning back to normal because I wasn't actually burned."
Kimmi and Corky are both a little freaked out, ooh, which one of us did this?
Corky's like, "Well, Kimmi went in there after me, and I know I checked that the water was okay." And Kimmy's probably like, "I didn't check the water," and Corky's the one that turned it on. They're probably both side-eyeing each other.
And Hannah's like, "Well, nothing really bad happened, whatever." They go to cheer practice, and all the different cheerleading squads are doing their routines. And the Shadyside girls notice the Bulldogs, and they're kind of jealous, so they want to, one-up what the Bulldogs are doing, except it doesn't go well. Ronnie doesn't land correctly, and they can hear Blair from the other team just sort of laughing at them. And every time they make a mistake, they can just hear her. At one point during this cheer routine, Corky's vision starts getting really wonky, and she starts feeling a little weird.
So Hannah gives Corky point. Here we come to a perfect example of why everybody hates Hannah. So here we have Corky. She's already a junior or something. She's been doing cheerleading since forever. She went to nationals back when she was in Missouri, for crying out loud. She came to Shadyside, and she used to be one of the top dogs back in the fall, right? Her and her sister were teaching everybody else how to do. And now, Hannah comes over, and she's just basically giving Corky pointers. "Oh, this technique, you could probably stand a little straighter and, tuck your thing and hold your arm this way, because, that looks better." And trust me, nobody likes it when some young upstart starts telling you how to do your business that you've been doing since. It's annoying. And so Corky kind of just smiles and nods politely, but inside she's like, "Ugh, how is this happening?" Going back to the roommate situation, the other person in the room, Kimmi, guess what? She's also not a fan of Hannah. Corky's annoyed? Well, how about Kimmi? We got the motive set up for both of the roomies right now.
After practice and before the competition, Corky goes to take a shower. She gets off the elevator, and in the hallway to the room, the entire carpet becomes tar-like and starts pulling her down.
So Deborah arrives, and when Corky looks again, she's on her knees on a normal carpet. She's not being sucked into, like, a carpet...
Tar pit?
Yeah, a carpet tarpet. Carpet tarpet? A
Carpet.
Tarp.
And obviously, once again, the ever-present subject of the evil spirit comes up, and Deborah says, yes, I can feel it. With the crystal on my neck, I can feel it.
The way the camp works is they practice every day, which, by the way, they get graded on that as well. There's, like, judges walking around looking at everybody's practice. And then they have dinner, and then every night, there's a competition. Every single night of this week-long camp, they compete. And then basically the overall winner, based on all the points and all the competitions, is like awarded at the end, I guess. We actually never find out who wins, because RL Stine doesn't give a crap. Anyways, for the first night's competition...
Blair's team, the Bowdogs, win. But every night they do give the most spirited member of each team a red spirit ribbon. Hannah wins the spirit ribbon for the Shadyside team. And Deborah's the only one that's happy for her.
This is the part where the team cohesion is really not working for Shadyside. I would not be surprised if they don't win the prize at the end of the camp because they all hate Hannah. And really, Hannah is doing her best. It's a competition, right? She's giving somebody pointers. It's because she wants the team to do well. And she's trying to bring everybody up. If she's like really happy and bouncy and cheerful all the time, it's a cheerleading camp where their judges are even judging the workouts. Yeah, obviously you're supposed to act that way. I said earlier she's 110%. In this situation, you kind of have to be. If you're in it to win it, you have to do what she's doing. It's bad on them to get really bummed out by her winning that spirit ribbon. She's the only one that seems to actually care about winning this competition.
Anyways, as they're leaving the award ceremony, Corky overhears Blair talking smack about all the other teams. You know, oh, there's no competition this year. They're all so bad. What's the point of even coming? We're just gonna win anyways.
So later that night, Corky has another of these freaky Bobby dreams. Bobby comes to her, and she's hovering over Corky. Again, she's trying to speak, she's trying to communicate. Once again, grabs herself by the hair, off comes the top of the head.
And this time, it's snakes slithering and hissing. Corky wakes up to screaming. At first she thinks it's her screaming, but then she realizes it's Hannah screaming.
Somebody had cut Hannah's braid clean off while she was asleep.
And put it right there for her to find in the morning. Like, first thing she sees when she wakes up, her braid. Hannah obviously accuses Kimmi and Corky because they're the only people in the room. Like, the only two other people in the room. And she goes off to tell Miss Green. Mm-hmm. And Kimmi is worried it might be her. Corky is actually convinced it's Kimmi until she goes to her dresser to get a shirt and she finds a pair of scissors and it has Hannah's hair in it.
At breakfast, Corky sits by herself, and Kimmi is also quiet and in her own head. Hannah is actually talking to Deborah about something. Deborah's listening, and they're really into a discussion, but Corky just goes over and barges in and says, hey, I gotta talk to you about something. And Deborah is like, no, I'm actually in the middle of talking to Hannah about something. Can you talk to me later?
Corky's kind of upset about this. She's not take that well. But lucky for her, she doesn't have time for a conversation with Deborah because Miss Green is there. She wants to talk to Kimmi and Corky.
And so she's like, Hannah told me everything, and you girls better come clean about what you did, because this is not acceptable. We don't do this, and there's going to be consequences. And just make it easier for yourselves and tell me exactly what you did. Kimmi confesses and says, yep, it was me. And Corky's like, actually, it was me. I did it. And so they confess back and forth.
And Miss Green is just tired of it. She's just like, you know what? We'll deal with this when we get back to Shadyside, but there's going to be these consequences.
Quote-unquote consequences, yeah, whatever. Anyway, so Kimmi and Corky walk back to their room. As they're walking back, I guess they're watching Blair show off in the courtyard. At the competition that evening, Corky is still upset at Deborah ignoring her earlier. The Redwood Bulldogs are the first to perform. As Blair goes into her second handspring, something goes wrong.
Corky heard the sickening crack as her face hit the hardwood floor. Her arms continued to thrash about wildly, but Blair made no attempt to get up.
That's a concussion.
Even from where she was sitting, Corky could see the cut in Blair's lip, and she could see that her two front teeth had been broken in half. Blair's head rolled about as blood continued to flow from her mouth down the front of her uniform.
At practice the next day, the Shadyside girls are practicing the pyramid. Normally, the way this works, right, is that Corky goes on top of the pyramid, and then Kimmi's supposed to catch her, and then Kimmi gets frozen by the spirit and drops her, you know, the usual.
Didn't it start with Kimmi being at the top and then Bobby not catching her?
Yeah, Bobby dropped her. This is the whole shtick, right? This is what my prediction was, that sheer routine would lead to somebody's death, and this is the death pyramid here. Corky's like, alright, fine, let's do it, even though she has misgivings about it. But then Hannah's like, no, I want to be at the top. I want to be at the top. Kimmi allows Hannah to be at the top of the pyramid, which really upsets Corky because this is her shtick. She does the top of the pyramid.
And I think this was the move that Bobby and Corky brought to the team.
Exactly. This is her signature move. A, she's upset because Hannah's doing this thing that's like her signature move. She's really freaking pissed about this. But B, this is really dangerous. Hannah doesn't know what she's dealing with here. This is the death pyramid. Somebody's gonna get evil spirited. Somebody's gonna get hurt. So there's like competing emotions. A, she doesn't want Hannah to get hurt. But B, she's also mad at Hannah. It's just like all over the place. Despite all of her misgivings and feeling like it's all gonna go wrong, everything ends up okay. It's perfect Hannah! And she executes it amazingly and everybody's happy. And Corky's like another rung of the pyramid that Hannah climbs to get up to her amazing success and whatever. So after practice, the girls are changing in the room. Kimmi heads out to the dining hall while Corky is still getting ready. And Hannah has just come out of the bathroom.
So Hannah's just doing a running monologue to Corky about how they have to win the competition. Corky quickly pulled open her top drawer. Her hand fumbled through the t-shirts inside until she found the scissors. Wrapping her hand around the handle, she lifted the scissors from the drawer. Hannah was still talking excitedly about the competition, her back to Corky. Raising the scissors like a knife, Corky took a step toward Hannah. This is my chance to finish what I started, Corky thought. Silently, she made her way across the floor and stopped behind her unsuspecting roommate. No more teasing, Corky thought. No more fooling around, this is it. Goodbye, Hannah.
So Kimmi comes back into the room just in time. Turns out she forgot the pom-poms. Corky quickly hides the scissors and pretends. It's like this comical Looney Tunes scenario where you're sneaking up to somebody, you're about to whatever, and then they turn around and you're just like, whoop, what's going on? Nothing, everything's fine. Crisis averted, but now Corky finally realizes, yes, it really, really is her. She suspected it now, but it's for real. She's hit with nausea, and the entire room is flashing red to black, and then back to red, and then back to black, over and over again.
She shut her eyes, but the flashing colors continued on her eyelids. The roar in her ears grew louder. She thought she heard laughter, evil laughter, somewhere far away. Suddenly, the sink became scalding hot, and with a cry more of a shock than of pain, she jerked her hands away. And then, I nearly killed Hannah, Corky realized. I nearly murdered her. And then the horrifying words pushed their way into her consciousness. I am the evil one now.
Part 2. Cold Fear. The rest of the camp gets kind of fast-forwarded. Corky says that she's sick, and she stays in bed the entire time. So now we're back at Shadyside after the camp. Corky is battling the demon for control over her body. The flashing red and black is where the evil takes over.
And she finally understands what Bobby was trying to tell her. Look inside your own head. Look inside yourself. You're the evil one.
Sean comes in and wants to show her something on his computer.
So she starts to wrestle with him. And then she decides like, oh, you know what? In this position, I could break his arm.
She actually starts to twist his arm and she's about to like basically rip it off. And he's screaming like, no, stop. What are you doing? Somehow Corky manages to gain back full control of her body and let Sean go.
And he's just like, you're such a jerk. I was going to show you something.
You're so confusing. Like, first you want to wrestle, next you want to kill me. I don't understand.
And now you're kicking me out of your room.
The entire time, there's just dark laughter in her head. She can't even hear Sean. She just hears the evil spirit. When she goes back to bed, she has this vivid dream about the last moments of Sarah Feeder's life.
And she dreams that she's on a boat. And then, but slowly that boat turns into the snake, and then the snake is just like devouring the entire dream. She wakes up. And then she starts yawning, but her yawn turns into a hiss. And then the hiss keeps going. And then there's like this green gas that comes out of her with like this powerful stench.
A voice comes from the fog and says it's time to kill. Starting with Deborah. We know the shtick, right? The evil spirit is going to go after all of your enemies. And she's mad at Deborah because Deborah wouldn't talk to her that one day.
And
she'd rather talk to Hannah.
Well, and also because she was getting so chummy with Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
The evil takes over her body, calls Deborah up, tells her to meet her at the Division Street Mall at the far corner of the parking lot in the back of Dolby's department store.
So basically, evil Corky drives to the parking lot. She's narrating in her head about how there's not going to be anybody around in that corner of the lot. There won't be any witnesses, and it's going to be so easy to kill her. Evil Corky's stupid plan is she's going to just floor the car and run Deborah over. So Deborah's just waiting in the middle of the parking lot, just like, da-da-da-da-da. Evil Corky's just gunning that Honda, just like right at her.
But Deborah is not from the Prometheus school of running away. She jumps sideways.
Yay, and she's fine.
Corky ends up getting the car stuck on the cement divider. And when Deborah runs over, oh my god, what happened? Are you okay? Corky's just well, the accelerator was stuck, but let's go for a drive.
This doesn't make any sense. Either A, your accelerator is stuck and your car's broken and then you just don't drive the car until it gets looked at. Or B, your car's fine and you were trying to kill Deborah. Just one or the other. Remember in Haunted, when the ghost is trying to kill the girl, he pushes the accelerator. The ghost makes the car accelerate. She has no control. She can just steer, but she can't stop the car. They get that car looked at. It goes to the mechanic. She doesn't drive that until it gets the full checkout. There's none of that here. This is just the whole front of the car's caved in. Let's go for a drive. Deborah just avoided near death. And Corky just managed to somehow sweet talk her. I'm really concerned about Kimmi. I think the spirit is possessing her again. We need to talk about this.
So come into my car with the broken accelerator. I just crunched a divider and a lamppost.
Deborah's are you sure it's fine? And evil Corky just puts the key in the ignition and it somehow the car manages to turn on. She's no, it's fine. See, the car turned on. It's that is not the definition of fine. I've seen cars turn on only to have smoke pour out of them a minute later. Doesn't mean the car is good to drive. But anyway, they've got down to the old mill. Great, that sounds like a really nice, safe place to go. This is described as the thing that the teenagers do in this town. They go to the old mill, and they go to that big wheel, and they climb to the top. So apparently, back when the mill closed, they applied some brakes to the wheel so it doesn't spin, so you can actually climb onto it. Completely unsafe. So anyway, the two of them just climb right to the top of the wheel, oh yeah, this is a great place to talk. Evil Corky just wants to push Deborah off the top of the wheel. It's 30 feet off the ground.
So the entire time, Corky just still gives vague comments about how Kimmi might be evil. And Deborah's why can't we talk about this on the ground? As she continues to climb up after her. Right as evil Corky is about to push Deborah off,
there's a security guard that comes by and goes hey, what are you kids doing up there?
This is so unsafe. What's wrong with you kids?
Corky drives Deborah all the way back to her car and drops her off. And attempt foiled, somehow. Even though this is a super powerful evil spirit. I digress. Corky wakes up in the middle of the night and realizes that the spirit is gone. It's somewhere deep in the back of her mind, no longer has control of her body. She has full control again. She remembers everything that happened, how she nearly killed Deborah. Now she actually has control and she's determined, you know what? I need to find a way to get rid of the spirit. And she remembers, wait a second, before I got taken over last time, I had this memory of Sarah Fear on her boat right before she died. Maybe all of the memories of all the people that got possessed before me are still somewhere in my head. They came with the spirit. So I know Sarah Fear was able to defeat the spirit somehow. If I go back to her memories and figure out what she did, maybe I can do the same thing and fight off the evil spirit and win.
So she kind of closes her eyes and she feels she can sort of access Sarah Fear's memories if she goes into this deep sleep. And we'll talk about Sarah Fear's memories in the mythos. Essentially what Corky realizes is that in order to kill the evil, she needs to kill herself.
The ultimate sacrifice.
Part 3, Hot Water.
Corky thinks about killing herself, but wants to live not just for herself, but for her sister. Her sister died so young before she could experience so many things that come with life, and she feels really bad about that. She's you know what? I gotta do all those things for her because she couldn't do it. And so now she's really conflicted. She's you know what? I can't do it. I can't kill myself. I'll just live through this no matter what. No matter how bad it gets, I'll just keep making the best of it that I can.
I'll just ignore the evil and I won't cooperate with any of the evil deeds it wants to do. The evil obviously decides to torment Corky by making it seem like razors are going after her, things that she's touching are burning her, makes her see eyeballs in her eggs, it makes her smell putrid aromas. Kimmi calls Corky later that day just to make sure she's okay. You seemed off. You didn't feel well after the cheerleading camp. We just wanted to make sure you're okay. Hannah was really worried about you. Hannah won't stop talking about you. We're so worried about you. So Corky arranges to meet Kimmi at River Ridge over the Kanananka River.
We all know what the evil Corky's trying to do here. But poor old unsuspecting Kimmi shows up anyway. They walk along the edge of the cliff, and they talk about the goings-on at camp.
And evil Corky tries to convince Kimmi that Hannah was lying to get them kicked off the team so Hannah could be the star, and maybe Hannah's the evil one.
Corky then tells Kimmi that the evil is still around. At this point, they're right up at the cliffside, and she just
shoves Kimmi down the cliff into the river.
For those of you that have been reading this whole series or read it in the past, this is that moment, if you're reading it chronologically, where you're like, finally, somebody's getting pushed off this cliff. We've been through so many books where, like, people go to this cliff, they want to shove somebody off. Like, we saw this in First Date.
Surprise party.
Somebody actually did get shoved off the cliff. It was in Sleepwalker. A car actually went over the cliff. But anyway, finally we get like a cliff of death killing scene. This forces the real Corky to wake up and go like, oh my goodness, this is my friend that just died because of the evil. I can't live with myself like this. I can't continue to just trying to prolong my life.
Well, there's actually this really long scene where Corky keeps saying, I need to die, I need to die. Oh, I can't die, I'm so young. And the evil's like, no, you can't die. And she's like, no, but I need to die. Oh, but I can't die. And the evil's like, yep, you can't die. And it just keeps going like, die, can't die. Do it, don't do it.
She's got like at least 13 reasons why she should end it all and kill the spirit. And she does end up throwing herself down into the river. As Corky is drowning, the evil starts to basically leave her body.
As she choked, the evil began to erupt from her mouth. She thrashed blindly as the force flowed out of her, blasting the water, churning it, heating it with its evil. Hotter. The water grew hotter as Corky thrashed and choked. Hotter, until the river boiled, and still the evil poured out. The evil flowed into the churning brown waters, protesting its fate. A howl of fury rising in Corky's ears, raging through the tossing waters. Hotter. The brown water bubbled and boiled up. Tall geysers erupted toward the black sky. Even hotter. Corky writhed in pain as the water scalded her struggling body. I'm dying. Dying. She felt suddenly light. The evil had departed. And then, you can't die! The spirit wailed, tossing Corky's body over the surface. You cannot die! You cannot betray me. I am you, and you are me. You cannot die. Weaker, the waters began to cool. The eerie white steam drifted apart in the heavy rain. Weaker, I won't let you die, the ancient force declared. Gathering its strength, it pushed the waters beneath Corky, pushing her up, up, until she rose above the water, suspended in the white mist. I won't let you die. You are free now. You are out of the water! You are free! Hovering over the water like a sagging helium balloon, Corky's body slumped lifelessly, her head back, her eyes staring blindly up at the storm clouds. No! The evil spirit's wail of defeat rose like a siren, then faded to silence. Corky's body dropped back into the water without making a splash. You are dead, the spirit admitted, and in dying, you have killed me.
So now we switch to Kimmi's point of view. Surprise! She's alive. She actually somehow battles her way up to the surface of the river. She's okay. She's trying to tread water, and she sees Corky take that dive down into the river off the cliff. Good on her. She actually swims upstream, tries to somehow save Corky from drowning, even though, Corky's the one who just pushed her off the cliff. She's freaked out by all the weird watery goings on, but she sees Corky's body kind of splash back in the river, I guess. And now she sees where she is. She grabs her. She uses her lifeguard skills, pulls Corky out of the water onto the grassy shore, and starts to do CPR. I have to give a shout out to another Fear Street high schooler that knows some good first aid and rescue skills. This is pretty cool. I actually used to be a certified lifeguard, and this checks out. You think that Corky's pretty much dead, Kimmi's about to give up, and, it's like one of those Hollywood scripts. Right as Kimmi's about to give up, Corky spits up the water and is somehow revived, and she's okay.
As they sort of get up and leave, Corky looks over. By the shore, she sees Bobby's smiling face and realizes, you know what? Everything's okay. And she and Kimmi head off home. Epilogue.
Going back to everybody's at cheer practice, and everything's going well. Corky, Kimmi, Ronnie, Deborah, they all go back to the corner and they're joking around and they're having fun. When the waitress comes by to take their orders, Corky is craving pea soup.
That freaks out the other girls, and she obviously changes her order because joke, and they all burst into laughter. And that's the end of the book. Mythos. Let's start with the callback. Hannah might be dating Gary Brandt, but by the end of the book, Gary Brandt might have a new girlfriend. One thing about the Gary Brandt callback is I have to say this. Whenever they bring Suki Thomas into a book, they always insinuate that she's like a naughty girl or a dirty girl because she's promiscuous. But Gary Brandt is equally, if not more, promiscuous, but it's just okay, a normal thing for him to be the way he is.
And this is going back to in earlier episodes. And you guys, if you check out the latest YouTube versions we just posted, we'll be gushing about how progressive RL Stine is and his female protagonist. Sure, we still have female protagonists in this book. In fact, this whole book series, right? It's about cheerleaders. All the protagonists are female, but you still have these little sexist undertones there with the Suki Thomas constantly getting slut-shamed for whatever, having so many boyfriends, and yet Anna just pointed out Gary Brandt sleeping around with all the girls, and everyone's just like, whatever, I guess that's just how it is.
Or Deborah is just too thin.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's talk about Sarah Fear, because, first of all, in this book, Corky talks about how Sarah Fear died in 1898. But in The Second Evil, we're told explicitly that not only did Sarah Fear get sick in 1899, she died later that year in 1899. We have two instances in the story that Sarah Beth Plummer told us that she died in 1899.
Even if we go back to the first book, I'm not 100% sure, but we do see her tombstone. And again, not 100% sure, but tombstones say the year the person died. That's one of the things that's on the tombstone.
The gravestone says 1875 to 1899. But the story is still the same. Sarah Fear went sailing on a beautiful calm day on Fear Lake. She was sailing with her nephew Michael, her niece Margaret, her brother, and her personal servant, Jason Hardy. You know, it's a beautiful day. They're having a great time. You know, she's chatting with the kids. They're having fun. They want to play with the boat. And then a butterfly flies by Sarah, sort of goes near her, and this cruel laugh goes off in Sarah's head, and Sarah just reaches out and just squishes the butterfly in her hand.
Sarah and the evil converse. Sarah doesn't want to commit any more murders, but the evil wants more. We get kind of like a few flashbacks inside Sarah's own mind, and this is calling back to the strange murders that Sarah Beth Plummer was investigating in the previous book.
But the thing is, the murders that Sarah Beth Plummer was investigating, they are completely different from the murders that we are given here. The murders that Sarah Fear here is flashing back to is the man at the mill who caused her husband's accident. You know, she shoved him from behind, pushed his head under the mill wheel, and his head is ground up as fine as corn. Or the woman who lived in the big house on the hill who insulted the Fears. She wrapped a clothesline around her neck so tight that the rope actually disappeared under the woman's skin. Or the young police constable sent to ask questions. You know, he's a nice guy, friendly, kind of good looking, but he just asked too many questions. So she shoved his head deep into a boiling pot of water. All his hair floated to the top of the pot, and the head was as white as a boiled potato and nearly as soft.
Pretty graphic details, and you'd think people would notice a police constable being missing. Sarah Beth Plummer does talk about the police covering up for Sarah Fear, but geez.
Well, they talked about Simon Fear's money, right? He still had a lot of influence in the community.
Yeah, but this is some like next level.
In Sarah Beth Plummer was researching a maid who was killed in the kitchen and someone who was killed in the stables.
Right,
so those are
a house guest. Right?
Yeah, so there were just like more murders that didn't get touched on here. Sarah wants this evil gone. The evil's like, I'm never gonna leave. And Sarah says, you know, I think I know how to get rid of you. And the evil's like, well, whatever you do, you know, I just jump into the children.
So the evil does everything possible to prevent Sarah from jumping off the boat, which is what Sarah's resolved to do. She's like, if I die, you die with me. You know what? Sarah's just not gonna have any of it. And she just dives right off the boat.
And as Sarah drowned, the evil thrashed inside her, fighting desperately. As the water invaded her lungs, the spirit struggled to free itself. She felt it try to thrust itself out from her throat. The water bubbled as a stream of green gas erupted from her mouth. The eruption was so powerful that it forced Sarah to the surface, etc., etc. The water was hot, boiling, scalding hot, burning her skin, so unbearably hot. And the green gas poured into the tossing, boiling water. Up, rise up, the voice told her. Rise up and save us both. But Sarah plunged lower, forcing herself down. Now she could feel two fears at once, her own and that of the ancient spirit. Both frightened now, both about to die, both dying. The boiling, bubbling water churned around her. The flowing green gas encircled her, shutting out all the light. The spirit was trapped in Sarah's drowning body. The evil voice cried out, "No!" A wail of rage, of disbelief. The cry was strong at first, then weak, then a whimper of faint protest. The green gas bubbled away. Sarah Fear's eyes were bulging wide, but she saw nothing now. Not even the still blackness. For she and the evil were dead.
Thing is, though, the evil didn't actually die with her. It kind of just got trapped in her rotting body in the coffin somehow. So this is the part where you kind of have to pause and think, okay, so is the evil really actually gone? Because A, it could have just jumped to Kimmi's body. Or B, it could just be somehow lying dormant inside of Corky's body and she just doesn't know it yet. There's no reason the evil's permanently gone.
The evil was trapped in Sarah Fear's coffin, right? So it clearly wasn't dead. It just latched onto the next body. Maybe it did die for a bit after Corky died, and it sort of knocked itself out. But couldn't it just later wake up like it did in Sarah Fear's coffin and go, I need a new body? And this time it doesn't need someone to fall onto a coffin. It just needs someone to go wherever the evil spirit is. It's in this massive river. Hosts all around. People who go fishing, people who go canoeing, etc., etc.
Assuming it's still in the river, which it does say the little kernel of the spirit's power kind of just like went away into the river. Now we're talking something like the ring of power being sunken in the river Anduin, just waiting for Smeagol to fish it out, right?
That's exactly what's happening. Which is great because it brings us to the meat of our mythos. We have the corporation and we have the naturally occurring phenomena caused by the mineral. By being in Kanananka River, does Kanananka River go into Fear Lake?
That is an interesting question, right? Because we got the river and we got the lake. Do they just pass each other by? Like Anna just mentioned, does the river empty into the lake? Maybe it's vice versa. We actually have no clue.
Is now the spirit, when it was in that cemetery, I assume it was very close to that blue clay and the glowing minerals. Is it also being exposed to that in the river? Is it gaining strength now that it's in the river?
Do you think that's what happened? Do you think it kind of like shriveled up and died but remained inside Sarah Fear's body, but then somehow became revived by the presence of the mineral?
Yes.
I mean, I think we're basically saying the spirit came about somehow by way of the mineral, right?
Yes.
Either somehow created by Simon Fear, or maybe it's just like a naturally occurring phenomena of action.
Well, I think, remember how they said that Sarah Fear was close to death and then everyone thought she was going to die, but she made like a recovery? I think that it was because Simon Fear was so scared of losing Sarah, this connection to his grandson, that he desperately wanted to find any way to save her. And he, as we had assumed previously, got his fortune from mining the minerals, dealing with the blue clay. So I think he experimented on her using the resources that he had available, the natural resources, and that is what brought about the evil spirit within Sarah Fear.
So Simon did a deal with the devil to bring his granddaughter-in-law back to life.
The corporation would be very interested in this. Do you remember in The Knife where they talked about the bodies in the hospital? Maybe those bodies are there as a way to try, they have all these bodies because they want that evil spirit. Because they know that somehow that is connected to the blue clay.
They can create other evil spirits.
Exactly.
They could actually create these undead super soldiers that are capable of controlling other people's minds.
I think what they're trying to do is figuring out a way to control minds, but not necessarily with an evil spirit, just to have a mind control property.
By studying this evil spirit's powers, they could become one step closer to that. This is one other thing, like how about, I think in the first book, we theorized that maybe the bus driver was involved with the corporation. We already figured out that most of the school employees are affiliated with them somehow, so it makes sense that the bus driver would be. Now, he's still on the job after 2 kids die. Well, yeah, that makes sense. That's just part of his job, is to like investigate what's going on. This is just like that guy who was working at the restaurant in First Date. He always seems to leave the room exactly when the stuff is about to go down, but he's always there coming back when everything's settled down, keeping an eye on the situation. This is the bus driver's job too. There seem to be people posted in key positions whose job it is to just keep an eye on the situation or carry out certain tasks to make sure that certain things happen. One of the things I want to talk about here is, from one point of view, 1899 versus 1898. RL Stine just messed up, okay? He clearly doesn't give a rat's ass about this book or this book series. He doesn't care. The grand finale of the Fear Street Cheerleaders is just completely ruined because he just doesn't care. But we could be generous and we could say, hey, you know what? Why don't we just throw him a bone and make this part of the conspiracy theory, right? Is there any possible reason why there could be this discrepancy? Let's take this as canon. Let's say, yeah, there are 2 different years. There's a conflicting narrative, and what's the reason behind it?
Well, I think you could either excuse it as Corky just didn't remember a date this random lady told her a few months back. Or you could say that this was Corky getting Sarah Fear's memories via the evil spirit. This is like the purest historical, like she is traveling back in time to get this 1898 date. But all the 1899 stuff, that's from secondhand information, right? That's from whenever they decide to bury the bodies. That's from when they finally told Ben Fear, who had the journal that Sarah Beth was reading from. Maybe that's when he found out. There could have very well been a cover-up.
You mean like for the greater good?
I mean, maybe Simon Fear was trying to find a way. I mean, look, he had just lost his grandson, right?
Yep.
Which was Sarah Fear's husband. Now he has to lose his granddaughter-in-law. He has to deal with the loss of Sarah's brother and then those 2 kids. They were living nearby. They were living in Sarah Fear's house. He had probably gotten to know them. That's tragic. So maybe he was doing this thing to try to bring them back to life. Because we surmise, based on our mythos, Simon Fear had brought Sarah Fear back to life once via the blue clay, via the minerals, via the water, who knows what. Now, maybe he was for an entire year trying to do that again.
Oh, there's something. Could be. This is actually really interesting. I think you're hitting on something here. In her flashback, we don't see the kids or the servant actually die. We just see her. So now you gotta think about what actually happened. Did they have to die because of what they saw? Was Simon Fear actually responsible for their deaths as part of this cover-up? That's actually something to ponder on. Just riffing off what you just said, that's starting to become a real possibility.
Another thing, they do say when Corky gets into the evil spirit memory, it says, oh, yes, Sarah Fear was dead, drowned in Fear Lake, surrounded by 4 other stones for Michael, for Margaret, for their father, and for Jason Hardy. All dead, all drowned in the boiling waters of the lake. You know, they keep saying the boiling waters, you know, that Sarah Fear was boiled alive. In the second book, Kimmi's head was held in that boiling water by Corky's hand. Neither one of them had any, redness, right? And then in the third evil, they were both in this boiling water again. And there is none of this boiled alive type thing for the 2 of them.
You know, that's interesting. I think the spirit is gradually losing its power over time. So in the beginning, it can boil a whole lake. Then you fast forward to the first evil, and it can boil a shower room worth of shower water and scald somebody to death. In the second book, it can boil a tea kettle and pour it over a girl's hand. By the time you get to the end of the second book, the boiling water in the bathtub doesn't even kill anybody. You get to the third book, and you have a girl stepping into some hot water in a tub. We've all stepped into some hot water in a tub. Yeah, it's really hot. It hurts, it burns, but you don't have welts on your skin, and the red mark fades away after a minute or 2. And that's exactly what happens in this book. At the very end of the book, there's some hot water, but again, nobody's boiled to death. It seems like there's this gradual progression of less and less power that the spirit has. And in fact, you see it in this book. When the spirit is possessing Corky, she doesn't seem to have nearly as much power as Kimmi did when she was being possessed. And she's also able to remember everything, whereas Kimmi lost all her memories. In the first book, the spirit is able to possess and reanimate a dead body, and there's no indication that that kind of thing is possible getting into the later books.
There's a scene in this book where the spirit is not in Corky's body, where Corky has that. It's sort of like in the secret bedroom where the character there has this moment of clarity. Mm-hmm. You know, the spirit's gone doing something. If the spirit was doing that in Jennifer's body in the first evil, wouldn't it just get into deep rotting? And then the spirit would have to jump in and be like, oh, I need to fix this all up again.
Right. I mean, if the spirit had all the power that it had before, Corky dying wouldn't be a problem. You throw her up onto land again, and then you just reanimate her dead corpse and you're good to go. It seems like the spirit's power is just fading further and further as you progress through the story.
So do you think there's something in that specific area near the lake, near the cemetery, near the Simon Fear house that has the properties that have given this spirit the powers that it has? And that because it has spent so much time, I mean, part of this book is an hour out of Shadyside. It's away from all the properties that give the evil spirit strength.
Could be. It's also possible that it just has a certain amount of power to begin with, and it just uses it up over time. Every time it has to jump bodies, it loses a certain amount of its spirit power. It's possible that instead of clay to recharge itself, it actually needs to do evil things like kill people. It's just not killing enough people in the modern time period to be able to like really replenish its reserves. There's different possibilities here for sure.
It's sort of like a nitpick, but we're still talking about the evil spirit. You know, you're talking about it gains power from killing. When you had the whole Deborah thing, she ends up dropping Deborah at her car at the mall and just doesn't kill Deborah that night. Like, we've seen what this evil spirit can do, how it can kill. It could have just frozen Deborah on the spot and just rammed her in the car.
Yep.
Like, between the two cars. It could have done so many things with Deborah that it didn't do. With Sean, it just, like, let him escape.
Yeah, so this is definitely one of my major nitpicks. So in the first two books, the evil spirit paralyzes people or actually takes control of their body, makes them move and do things that they don't want to do. So pick up a kettle and pour boiling water on yourself, or
freeze you in place.
Exactly, so you can't move. This would have been far more effective as a method of killing her targets in this book. You mentioned the parking lot. How about up on the mill wheel, right?
Just freeze Deborah so she misses one of the
exactly
holds.
There's any number of ways you could have done that. You could have frozen Deborah while she was driving her car. Or you could have made Deborah push on her own gas pedal and drive her car into a lamppost or something. There's a million ways to do this thing. It doesn't happen. All of those powers that the spirits seem to have had in previous books, somehow, either as a plot convenience or whatever, just poof, gone.
I mean, I think we're on full-blown nitpicks at this point, right?
Yeah. So again, the biggest one is the 1899 death in Second and First Evil versus 1898 in Third Evil. There's two ways of looking at it. Either everything that RL Stine writes is that's set in stone, that's the gospel, but no, this is clearly like a freaking typo because the guy doesn't care about this book.
Well, who knows? It's hard to say about things like that.
I don't know about that.
But I think my question is, from the first chapter or second chapter, when they're first in that coffee place, the four girls, after the pea soup explodes, realize the evil is back. And it's stated pretty explicitly in the book, like, oh, they've realized the evil is back. They never have, like, a conversation about it. The four of them never sit down and go, hey, the evil's back, we need to do something. Even after, like, all this stuff is happening, they never get together and go, hey, we need to talk about it and figure this out.
This book forgets, in the previous two books, we've had 4 people die. We had 2 girls die in the first book. We had 2 boys die in the second book. All of these kids knew those other kids that died. And now we're supposed to believe that they're not going to
go out of their way.
They're going to, like, obviously have a powwow and figure out what their survival plan is. Instead, they go on about their lives and go to cheerleading camp as if nothing is happening and everything's fine. When they literally know this evil spirit is back. It's so unbelievable, and it's really lazy storytelling.
Well, I mean, the 4 of them all saw the battle between Corky and Jennifer Fear, or Jennifer/Sarah Fear evil spirit thing.
Right, they all know that the evil spirit is a thing. All of them, they know it's a thing. There's no doubt about that.
And they, like, keep going off into, like, little groups and talking about it, but it would have been far more effective for Ronnie, Deborah, Kimmi, and Corky to go, we need to chat. We need to deal with this right now. If we don't deal with it right now, it's obviously targeting people in our group. What's happening to Hannah, what happened to, like, that Blair chick from the other school. So it could happen, any one of you, next time we pyramid, could land flat on your face, just like that Blair girl. So we need to chat.
Yeah, pea soup doesn't just volcano on its own. They all know that. It's so unbelievable. All that needs to happen is just get inside their heads and either figure out that A, they're going to try to figure out how they're going to get through this, or B, get into their head and explain to me how they rationalize their inaction. They're paralyzed with fear and they don't know what to do. Fine, okay, but get into their heads and let me see that so that I can believe it, because right now, the way it's written, it's unbelievable to me.
Another thing is, Miss Green explicitly says, we need to deal with this when we get back to Shadyside, because there need to be consequences. There are no consequences. Unless Kimmi and Corky go to her and say, you know what? The evil spirit was back.
The evil spirit made us do it.
Like, it's in the police report already, right? Like,
Yep.
Jennifer's cause of death was, like, the evil spirit. Is that just their excuse forever?
Miss Green probably works for the corporation and knows what's going on anyway.
90s things.
Okay, so there's not a lot of 90s things, but something caught my ear here. One of the other cheerleading teams is described as having a rap-based cheer routine that's described as, like, the ones that do all that rap stuff. All that rap stuff? I feel like kids wouldn't speak that way these days.
Is that how they would have said it in the 90s?
Like, maybe? That doesn't even sound right to me. All that rap stuff.
It sounded like a very coded way of saying that maybe they weren't a team of white girls.
Oh, maybe.
So what were your thoughts for this book?
Obviously, you guys know I didn't like this book. I've been griping about it this whole time. Just going back to the thing we've been harping on for the entire series of 3 books, the cheerleading chants, they still suck. You know, he does lay off on the cheerleading chants a little bit. There's not as many horrible ones.
The book does move faster with, like, the shorter character introductions. I don't think the main characters that have been there in the previous books really get introductions. They just get them in the scene, and sometimes they'll mention their hair or how they look at that moment. But you don't have the laundry, I don't think. Only Hannah has, like, a typical Fear Street character description because she's new. So it did help the book move a lot faster.
Overall, now, having read all 3 books in the series, I think this is a slightly better format. Definitely the first 2 books I really enjoyed, having the continuity, having to not deal with the character introductions at the beginning of every book. And these are very short books, so if you take up 10 pages on character introductions, that really eats into what you can do with the plot and the development. So that was helpful. However, this book takes that advantage, just totally throws it out with shoddy, lazy writing. I mean, this is some Joe Hill level stuff that we're dealing with here. If you guys take this 3-part series as a whole and think of it as one book, and then you look at a book like Nosferatu, where by the end of the book, Joe Hill gets completely lazy and just starts writing run-on sentences with typos, decides he doesn't care about the plot or the characters anymore, this is exactly what happens in this series. The last book is a total letdown. It didn't have to be that way, but I mean, that's just how I feel about it. You know, we speculated about Megan and Heather and whether or not they were ever going to get developed. You know, they didn't.
I didn't hate this book as much as you did, I guess. I do think there are a lot more things to nitpick in this book, especially in reference to the evil spirit, and also probably the lack of development for Heather and Megan. It's not as satisfying a conclusion if you look at it as a 3-part series. The book in itself, I thought, was okay, but on the larger scale, maybe didn't do as well as it could have. How many red spirit ribbons would you give this book?
You might have seen this coming, and you might not be surprised. I'm probably going to give this one 1 red spirit ribbon out of 5. It didn't really do it for me. The only thing that really rescued it from getting like a complete 0, which, by the way, I'm very tempted to give it, because this is a garbage book, but I like that it completes the whole story. I like that it ties up that little scene at the end where Bobby's ghost is kind of like laid to rest. You know, that whole storyline of Bobby dying and then Corky just carrying that burden of her sister that passed away. That kind of is okay, and it kind of wraps that up. It's just trash. If you're not gonna read the other 2 books, definitely don't read this one. If you've already read the other 2 books and you were kind of like on the fence about them, you're not missing anything if you don't read this one.
I guess I don't hate it as much as you. I give it 1.5.
Well, again, that means you hate it more than I do because it's on your scale.
No. So I give it 1.5 red spirit ribbons. That rounds to 2, first of all. I've given all the other books in this series a 2. It's only slightly worse than the other 2 books in the series, in my opinion. Yeah, it's on the Fear Street scale. It's not that great. But on the scale of the other cheerleader books, both of which have gotten 2s from me, it's not that bad.
Okay, I see. So basically, I liked the first 2 books a lot more than you did. I think I gave them 2s or something, and on my scale, which is my general scale, and then this one is a huge disappointment, and I gave it a 1. But you're being consistent. You say it's like about the same as the other ones.
I do think it's about the same. I think having it take place outside of Shadyside maybe made it a little more lackluster. these just random cheerleaders. And the fact that no one died, I think is kind of a cop-out. I mean, this is an evil spirit that's been possessing people for who knows how long, and it's being bested by this teenager. And I do have to say, one of the reasons I like this book was I do like how hard Corky has fought. In the first book, you had her not giving in the scene in the cemetery. She says, no, I'm not going to die in this stupid cemetery.
Yeah.
She fights really hard to get out. In the second evil, in the bathroom, she's being drowned. She managed to survive because she's imagining Sean crying over the loss of his sister. She's like, no, that's not going to be a thing. And she just smacks Kimmi / evil Kimmi, I guess, with her cast. And then in this book, you have the scene at the ridge, and after she shoves Kimmi down, Corky is able to swell up and go no, and throw herself down. And I think I really like Corky as a character. And I really love how Corky has this perseverance that she's able to say, I want to live, I want to persevere, and I will not let the spirit win. And that's something we've seen in all 3 books, and that's something that I really enjoyed.
I agree with you. Corky's definitely a character that's going to stay with me. In the Fear Street series, there's a few that really stand out, and she's one of them. But what I do have to say is I'm the kind of person that really latches on to little nitpicks, and it bothers me. And so this year discrepancy bugs me. A lot of the kind of shoddy character development, the thoughtless writing that went into this book bothers me. I feel like what you just described with Corky's character arc and how great it is makes it so much more disappointing to me that so little care was taken in this final book. You're right, it is a great trajectory that her character arc takes, and guess what? In a better writer's hands, this really could have been something. This could have been a real gem. And he takes a great beginning. The first 2 books are fine, and he kind of squanders it with this last one. Basically, I'm just letting my disappointment show in my rating. It's probably, honestly, a tattered, half a ribbon, rounding up to 1. If there's nothing else for thoughts on the book, why don't we talk about the next one in line?
Fear Street Super Chiller, Goodnight Kiss. Their first kiss could be their last. I have a really funny story to tell about this book. Just to describe the cover, it's this kind of sexy woman in this white bikini. She's lying on a beach. It looks like it's sunset. She's on a beach towel. There's a bat flying over her, and she has these 2 bite marks on her neck. It's kind of one of those books that you don't want anyone to see you with this book anywhere. So we had actually borrowed this from the library, and we had maxed out our renewals for it. So I had to physically bring this book in to be returned and checked out again. But the thing is, the library had requested it from another library. So the person at the checkout had to see if the other library would allow her to check this book in and then recheck it out to me. So the entire time, this book is just sitting on the counter for everyone in the library who walk by to see. And she just keeps staring at the counter. She would type on her computer and just sort of gaze down at the cover and just sort of look at me oddly and go back to typing on her computer. And then she realized eventually oh, I need to request it for you again. It needs to be returned to the other library and then sent back to us. I'm sorry. So she needs to go find this book in the catalog, and cover pops up. She clicks on the cover. She stares at it for a little bit and goes, is this the book that you wanted? I say, well, it looks like the same cover. And she just sort of goes, mm-hmm. It's really embarrassing, guys. Of all the Fear Street books that it could have happened to us with, it had to be the one with a mostly naked woman.
Yeah, this is the first one with a girl in a bikini on the cover.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really blown up. She's taking up the whole cover. It's pretty much just her body. And then this bat is an afterthought.
So yeah, I was being judged by the lady in the library. I just kept staring at it. Because I had to check something out later and I had requested something else. And she's like, oh, maybe those will come in with the other book. And she gives me a wink or whatever. And I'm just I'm leaving. Have a nice day.
We've had this book out for 2 months or something. She probably thought you were just reading it over and over again.
I think we've had it for a significant amount of time. So she must just be wondering, why have you maxed out the renewals and want to check it out again? So I've described the cover. I'll do my prediction. There's a bat. She's got bite marks. I'm going to say it's a vampire book.
Ooh.
That's a limb. I say that, you know what? She's on a beach. We've got another vacation season, I guess, and some Shadyside kids are at a beach. I'm gonna say it's not Fear Lake. I'm saying that it's another outside of Shadyside story. It deals with, I guess, vampires. I'll say the murder weapon is fangs. The murderer is a female, and the murder victim is male.
Okay, so I'm gonna say murder female, murder victim male, and I'm gonna say the murder weapon is a wooden stake. We're gonna have some vampire slaying in this book, I believe. I'm gonna say that they're gonna be on spring break in Florida.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Northeast.
Predictions locked and loaded?
Locked and loaded.
All right.
Thanks for listening, guys.
It's been fun. Although the book was crap, I do enjoy doing this, and I know Anna does too. See you guys next time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another thrilling episode of Rhett Read Podcast.
If you like what you hear, give us a shout out.
If not, let us know why in the comments.
Don't forget to rate, review, comment, share, like, and subscribe.
You can follow us at Rhett Read Podcast on Twitter and Facebook.
Or send suggestions or fan mail to red.read.podcast@gmail.com.
Until next time.
Peace!